Morinaka in chat says, the fact that you can shuffle the same people around these departments shows how useless they are. And that's 100% true, right? So, whilst I don't really have any truck with Nigel Farage's idea of having an entire cabinet full of people from business or whatever it is, but fundamentally, there's a reason why that Yvette can go to this, and Shibano can go from Justice to Home Secretary, and Lamin can go from Foreign Secretary to Justice Secretary and Deputy Prime Minister, and they all just do like musical chairs around the ministerial positions. Ultimately shows that none of these people are qualified to be in any of these positions, otherwise they would stick to where they are. It's ironic, really, that Shabana Mahmood is moving from Justice to Home Secretary, given that she's a lawyer, right? You'd think Justice would be the thing that she was good at. But obviously they want somebody who's from an ethnic minority background to do a bunch of their draconian policy so it looks a little bit more authentic, when of course it makes it look even less authentic, but whatever, right? But fundamentally, none of these people are proven to have any expertise in any of the areas in which they are being put into the ministerial role of. I mean, you just look at Peter Kyle's time. Luckily, he's out of the science technology post because he was so useless at it. He was just repeating lines from the Tony Blair Institute about the use of AI and digital ID cards, just full up page shill, and then attacking the Alan Turing Institute for looking into the potential ethical problems of AI adoption, because that's all Peter Kyle exists to do, is to find links between the AI sector and government to be able to benefit both or whatever at the expense of actual creatives in this country. He's been moved out of that post now. But fundamentally, when you actually look at the broad spectrum in which people have been shuffled around departments in this cabinet reshuffle, no one can be proven on any of these positions to know what the fuck they're talking about. I mean, just look at this, just people moving from minister to ministerial position. Oh, what I will say, the worst move here, the absolute worst move in the cabinet reshuffle, is the fact that Pat McFadden is now going to DWP. Quite literally, the only person who could possibly be worse at being DWP than fucking Killer Kendall, you know? Like, where Pat McFadden is part of the McSweeney kind of blue Labour moulding of the Starmer administration, the real kind of brains behind the minus 60-point approval rating that they have at the moment. So he will be even more fastidious in wanting to push through these further welfare cuts that Starmer has indicated that he wants to do, given the fiscal black hole that the NIESR have pointed out in the budget, like 40 billion behind where they need to be by 2029. So that's a really, really shitty implementation, really shitty person to put in the brief for the DWP. But then again, they're all bad, right? If you just look at the fact that basically no one is being moved from nowhere into a new position. All it is now is just the very few MPs that they have that are part of the Labour Together clique, i.e. this background group, this think tank that was formed essentially to usurp Jeremy Corbyn's leadership in the background and keep all of the right-wing Labour people in one place, rather than get them to leave the party, just keep them in the background so they can take over the party and turn it into a centre-right party again. And because there's so few of them left, because a bunch of them have had to resign due to scandals or whatever, essentially all you have now are the same group of MPs in ministerial positions being fucking shuffled around like it's musical chairs. Musical chairs on the Titanic is what we basically have in terms of the cabinet reshuffle at the moment. That's all that it is. Because if there are any more scandals, they're going to run out of insiders. They're going to run out of people in the inner ring of the Labour Together clique, the Politburo running the Labour Party at the moment. They're gonna, if there's any more scandals, they will run out of people to be able to put into ministerial positions, and might actually have to rely on somebody who doesn't suck. Although I do find it interesting that the two highest profile people who've been removed from ministerial positions have been Louise Haigh and Angela Rayner, because of just some scandals that managed to find their way into the right-wing press. I wonder if there might have been someone who leaked that information to the press. Who thinks that the right-wing press in this country could have been able to find out these very niche things from the history of Angela Rayner and Louise Haigh? And now suddenly there's basically nobody from even the soft left of the party, apart from Ed Miliband, I guess, in any position in the cabinet. And they just happened to all happen just before a cabinet reshuffle. Don't you find that weird, Chad? Don't you find that strange? And Louise Haig had just come out of slagging off DP World correctly for being a rogue employer at P&O for engaging in fire and rehire and getting in low-wage contractors to replace unionized workers, right? Like, they are a rogue employer, she was right. And then magically, a story about her from 10 years ago appears in the paper. Isn't that weird, chat? Don't you think that's strange? And whilst it's perfectly reasonable, right, going back to the point has been talked about in chat about people's aptitude for a ministerial brief. Like, you don't need to have a background in that area. You don't necessarily need to have been a doctor to be health secretary. You don't need to have been a teacher to be education secretary. I'm not saying that that's the case, but you need to have experience in governance. You need to have experience in the management needed to be able to use this department effectively. And none of them do. Like, literally none of them have any kind of aptitude for governance in the slightest. When the Clement Attlee administration was being formed, and I'm sure they had some more upper class people in parts of the cabinet too, but in the other parts of the cabinet, there were just people from regular working class backgrounds there. There was miners and lorry drivers and weavers and teachers and nurses and all that kind of malarkey, right? And the reason why they were good government ministers is because in the time in opposition, they had been putting in the work to prepare themselves to be ministers. They had been doing things in managing departments such as this on a local authority level, or they had been getting training to do so. They had been working their way up through the necessary training to become government ministers when the Attlee administration was formed. And yet, all of these chuckle fucks in the new cabinet reshuffle, these people spent all their years in opposition just attacking the left and trying to triangulate their way into appearing best for the voting at the election, having lied to a bunch of people as well. That's a good point in Ben as well. Like, they also spent years managing departments during World War II because the Tories were focused on the war, because there was a unity between the parties over how to govern the country, right? They had at least got some experience to try and be in the position to be a government minister. And none of the people at the moment have. It's how you can have Bridget Phillipson go on to Sky News and say, oh, well, we've got the plan to be able to talk about a strategy that we're developing over the next year, having been in government for a year already. Just infinite levels of incompetence at the basic management of society at this point. And it is funny, right, is that the people who've actually had the most amount of experience to be able to be in a position of governance or management are usually the people who've come from the trade unions, because these structures are regimented and they require good management, especially when you need to ensure that you are elected into your trade union positions. And now we have basically nobody in the cabinet with any experience coming up for reunions at all. It's all a bunch of consultants and elite professionals and lawyers and spads and people who've essentially had to engage in zero amounts of governance experience and clearly haven't had the training to do it either. It's just, honestly, this is so funny to me to watch the government just rearrange the deck chairs to play musical chairs on the Titanic, because fundamentally it proves that they're totally unserious as an administration. And again, these are the people who marketed themselves as the adults in the room. How's that looking now, chat? How's that looking now, Labour? And this is why they've had to double spending on management consultants. Having Rachel Reeves promised in opposition, having read the back cover of The Big Con by Rosie Collington and Mariana Mazzucato, that they were going to promise to halve consultancy spending because it was wasteful. And it's true, it was wasteful. It is wasteful to have ministers who don't know what they're doing, so they subcontract out the running of their departments to management consultancies. But that would require having people who are going to be in ministerial positions who know what the fuck they're doing, which they don't. They've got into government, realise it's a bit harder than just pressing the buttons and computer says yes, and now they're having to rely on even more management consultants than the Tories did, having promised to cut them. It's a shambles. It's pathetic. It's absolutely pathetic. Honestly, it's just so funny to me. That's a really good point as well, Ben. They've got Steve Reed in as housing secretary, and he was like a total NIMBY in opposition. Zero principles, right? The basis of Labour's growth plan is essentially on letting private developers do what they want. There's no council housing plan. They're basically ripping up all the legislation to give the developers what they want. And whilst that will certainly increase supply, probably bring down rents, probably won't bring down house prices. There was a big article in the Financial Times.
I'm literally a communist.
showing that there was very little that you could do to decrease house prices by increasing supply because of the financialization of the industry. Great big article, well worth you doing so. The increase in supply will probably bring down rental prices, which is probably the bigger thing that they're trying to do with this expansion of supply. But there's no real council housing strategy that there needs to be. But it's just so fundamentally unserious that they put somebody who literally described Boris Johnson's planning reforms, which were less far-reaching than Labour's planning reforms as a developer's charter, into being housing secretary. And this is also the same guy who was crook enough to accept money and tickets from people with the links to private water companies as the environment secretary. So, honestly, just a real shit show all round. Oh yes, Pat McFadden was the same person who said that we might have to, in the wake of Kim Ledbetter's Dignitas bill, people might have to pay for their own assisted suicide. Jesus Christ. I hate all these people. I hate all these people. I think the worst of all of the changes is Shabana Mahmood being the Home Secretary, when it's clear that she's one of the most authoritarian, like, right-wing conservative figures in the government. She's, like, totally on board with the TERF stuff. She's really on board with being really kind of rancid in terms of the rights of asylum seekers as well. She wants to change to, like, a social insurance model for welfare, which will really impact young people with mental health problems. Imagine being the Muslim who gets us into a real kind of authoritarian government and has nothing to do with what people would usually throw slurs at Muslims for being, like, Islamists or whatever, and it's entirely just because she's really fucking right-wing. Naturally, it's just her politics, nothing to do with anything religious at all. Is Cooper moved to ensure she gets no fallout if the Palestine action ban gets overturned? I'm not sure. Although what is weird to me that they're moving Cooper into foreign secretary role just so we just have another person implicated in the genocide? It seems weird to me that they won't just sacrifice Starmer and Lammy. They're going to throw plenty more people into the inevitable genocide investigations in a decade's time, you know? What is also funny to me, and also very depressing, is that now we've got Dougie Alexander as Scotland secretary again. Imagine we had fucking 10 years without that guy in Parliament, and we had the absolute queen that we stan of Murray Black in his place. And now it's just Blairism all over again. It's just Dougie Alexander, like he's like genital warts. He just won't go away. Hang on, you're hearing, Ben, that the reason why they got rid of David Lammy is because they didn't think he was good enough at having good relationships with Donald Trump? The guy who literally cucked himself out at every single principle that he purported to believe by saying, well, I changed my mind when Donald Trump bought me 2 dinners. And we're trying to say that he isn't good enough at appealing to the Americans? Well, clearly this is a man who's just in incredible embarrassment. And now he's become Deputy Prime Minister.
Because I'm literally a communist.
Literally, what must we do to appeal to Donald Trump? Peter Mandelson is still the UK ambassador to America, yeah, so that he can regale tales of mutual friendships with Donald Trump. Do you think that the unions that fund Labour have any chance to alter the direction that the party is going, or they're a complete lost cause? They have no representation in the cabinet anymore. How do the unions get any leverage when they have basically nobody to enact that leverage in terms of the cabinet meetings? There is nobody left. It was just Angela Rayner. Interesting that she happened to have this scandal that appeared out of nowhere that got her rid of her from the cabinet and as the deputy leader. Wow, I wonder why that happened. And now they've got plenty of other places to go, the trade unions do. I mean, there's already the internal stuff going on in Unite about wanting to re-examine their relationship with Labour. And there is a grassroots candidate in Unison who wants to talk about what Sharon Graham was talking about with no blank cheques for Labour as well. Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for membership to just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.